Women's basketball is booming nationwide, but for Connecticut fans, it's more like, what took you so long? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe and follow wherever you listen to your audio versions. It helps the show grow, and I genuinely appreciate the support. Every follow, subscription, and download not only helps build our UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NIL initiatives. With Bleeding Blue for Good, we give 10% of our revenue there, and another 10% I'm donating to Husky Ticket Project. Fantastic charity. I love them, Kevin Solomon and the guys there. I'm proud to partner with them to help keep sending kids to games like the UConn women, UConn men, and the football program. So again, that makes a real difference in our community. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me and for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. The UConn women have always been supported in the state of Connecticut. And as long as there's been sports and athletics in the name of women in Connecticut, it's long been a beacon of support for women's basketball. And for decades, it's been a place where fans have packed arenas, supported every generation of player, and treated women's sports as equals to their male counterparts. Since 1991, UConn fans have been privileged to witness not only countless fantastic players, championships, and also a consistent commitment to UConn women's athletics, building a culture that's unmatched across the country. Now, as we look across the national landscape, we're beginning to see that same fervor for women's basketball in places outside of Connecticut. Something that should have happened a long ago, but it's incredible to see now the growing viewership numbers, social media buzz, packed arenas across other states, signifying that women's basketball is finally gaining the widespread respect it always deserved. It's exciting, even refreshing, that the rest of the country is starting to catch up and match the level of dedication Connecticut has maintained for nearly 3 decades. So while it might have taken longer than it should have, we can celebrate the fact that the nation has turned a tide and we're finally seeing women's basketball recognized, valued, and supported on a level that aligns with the legacy of Connecticut fans have been upholding all along. And it's more than wins or championships. It's about raising the visibility and status of women's sports and creating a lifelong fan base that keeps the momentum going. But with that support being high in the state of Connecticut, we're finally seeing something that's a little bit different too. A real bridge forming between college and the pro game across the country. This isn't just something fans or analysts are hoping for. It's happening, and it's changing the sport. Recently, Connecticut Sun coach Stephanie White, in a piece with Emily Adams, talked about how fans are starting to follow their favorite college players into the WNBA. Quote, "It's the perfect storm of integration of college stars and the perfect storm of bringing the college fan to the WNBA because there have been a disconnect for such a long time," White said in August. It's just that right time. I feel like at times we had to push the league and we have had to push women's basketball, and I don't feel like we're there anymore. I feel like the recognition, the respect is there. The seeds that have been planted so long ago finally come to fruition, and I think we're seeing that, unquote. For years, there's been that gap even between diehard college fans wouldn't tune into pro games, but now people are tracking their favorite players well beyond college, creating a seamless fan experience that's truly revolutionizing the women's game. I have a graphic here, so we're going to talk some numbers. I'm going to put this up as I talk about it. Let's put it up. Let's add that to the stage. The 2024 WNBA season drew an average of 1.2 million viewers per regular season game, with 1.6 million tuning into the finals. These are record-breaking stats, and they show us two things. First, the quality of play has been undeniable. People are tuning in because these athletes are putting on an incredible show. And second, fans are invested in these players' journeys, and it's no longer just about watching them win a national title and then turning it off. The shift is massive for the WNBA and for women's sports in general. Now that the final series was that was intense, 5 games with close matchups, overtime battles, New York claiming its first title with Brianna Storr of UConn over Nafisa Collier of Bashman and UConn Heaven. It's really the stuff that legends are made of, and it's happening in the WNBA, which is phenomenal. I for one, never thought I'd see that because of that kind of chasm where most UConn fans in general that I talk to stopped watching the WNBA for whatever reason. It wasn't about, it's not the same as the NBA or whatever. It was just it kind of was like out of sight, out of mind. So it really is kind of a great thing to see this type of formation. And as was talked about in the Connecticut Sun article about the kind of a bridging of a gap, because that's exactly what it was. And you can't talk about any of this stuff without mentioning UConn. When UConn made it to the Final Four playing Iowa last year against Caitlin Clark, the most watched basketball game in ESPN history. Basketball game, not women's basketball game. It's clear that women's basketball has arrived at a level that hadn't been seen before, because UConn fans can argue that it's always been at a peak because of the nature of UConn dominating and all the fantastic players, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, Rebecca Lobo. That is 100% true. But as far as numbers, as far as the things that you're seeing on the screen, 328% viewership of the WNBA draft was up from 2023. 170% viewership up in the regular season. 305% viewership up at the All-Star game. 115% up in the finals. And finally, 80%. Even the WNBA countdown coverage is up almost 100% from 2023. Those are fantastic numbers, and you just can't deny it. Let's get back to, maybe people want that so they don't see my face, but we're going to get back to that. When UConn when Geno Auriemma was at Game 2 of the WNBA Finals, you could feel that he understands that the college programs play a big role in creating and nurturing these fan connections. UConn's fan base has, obviously, we talked about, been undeniably huge and incredibly loyal. When they follow a player from UConn to the WNBA, they bring their support and loyalty with them. And what does that mean for other college programs? Are they prepared to keep this bridge strong? I hope so. It's on them to start thinking about how they're going to connect their players to the pro level to foster that loyalty and keep fans engaged beyond graduation. Auriemma's right. We're on the verge of something special here where it's going to take a collective effort to keep this momentum going. And I can thank Emily Adams because she put this on my radar as our weekly contributor and fantastic writer for the Hartford Courant, who started talking about this again a couple weeks back, wrote a great piece in the Hartford Courant, but her comments to me on our show were about how the alumni base of UConn and obviously other powers like Tennessee, South Carolina, USC, Notre Dame, Stanford, LSU all need to contribute to keep moving the game forward. But outside of them, there needs to be other fan bases and alumni that need to coalesce. And just because they're not the top powers that have the power of the past, they need to continue to be moving forward. So if you aren't subscribing to her already, it's an absolute must. Coming up, Geno Auriemma's legacy in this and investing in the women's game. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to Locked On UConn. Just going over kind of the remarkable statistics that we have shown for the WNBA and their success, and how there's a gap now, a bridge for the gap that was created essentially by just fans that were more college fans that really kind of had a hard time kind of following their favorite player to the pros. And I think some of that has to do with new traditions have to be made. I think in particular when you start to see that the W has become something of a destination versus kind of like, oh man, my UConn career is over and now I have to go play in the WNBA, or I would go play overseas. So I think with all of the new interest, all the new sponsorships, all of the new social media buzz, we're going to start to see women's basketball in the professional ranks in the States start to rise. You'll see salaries rise. You're going to see endorsements. I know, plenty of folks have their own shoe now. Sabrina Ionescu, Stewie's teammate, Oregon alum. I think she has like her own shoe line. So all these folks are starting to reap the benefits of some of their past counterparts who probably should have been compensated on a level that is higher, but weren't because of the demand of it. And now the demand is high and it's crazy. And that's something that should be celebrated. But Geno Auriemma's legacy and vision in all of this, in kind of the role of investing in the growing women's basketball, rising tide is really a huge part of this. So let's dive a little deeper into that role. UConn isn't just a successful program; it's iconic. If you look back into the early 2000s when Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi were on the court, UConn was filling arenas like no other women's program. And there's the historic four-peat from 2012 to 2016, a stretch that built UConn's reputation as the gold standard in women's basketball. The level of fan engagement, the demand for tickets, the media coverage, UConn has shown other programs the vision, the blueprint of how you invest and believe in the potential of women's sports. Now, as women's basketball gains traction on a national level, Auriemma sees it as UConn's obligation to help other programs navigate the spotlight. And I love that. His message is simple. Success isn't about winning. It's about elevating the sport as a whole. Auriemma has been vocal about offering guidance to programs that may not have dealt with this kind of intention before. For UConn, filling arenas, managing high levels of interest is part of the routine. But for other schools, this is new territory. Auriemma is not saying this is a brag. He's saying it because he knows that when all programs succeed, the entire sport benefits. I'll correlate that with the media world. Most people that are in my industry, that are in podcasting or radio or TV, will go on other people's shows because they want to create a bridge between the audience that follows me and the Locked On UConn people and the audience that follows somebody else. Because if I win, they win. It's a very simple philosophy. Being competitive is one thing, and I know Geno is that on the court, but we're talking about the growth of the game, the growth of these girls that he brings up from high school and gets them and turns them from high school players to college players and eventually develops them into pros. So when you think about UConn's season ticket sales this year, they're sold out. It's happened before, but I think it's the first time we've sold out both the men's and the women's in probably 10 years. I could be wrong. Fact check me on that. But the games are so much more in high demand that it's clear the hunger for women's basketball is real. Auriemma wants other schools to recognize this potential. He's encouraging them to make the investment, got to pony up the cash, and to build their own loyal fan bases, to bring that same energy and commitment that UConn fans have always brought. And it's not just about bringing in ticket sales or getting media coverage. It's about creating a long-term impact. Starts from the bottom, building a foundation that allows women's basketball to grow sustainably. This brings us to another key piece, the investment part. Auriemma isn't just talking about creating a winning team. It's about building a culture. Back when UConn first joined the Big East, they were one of the few programs putting serious resources into women's basketball. And look where it's gotten them. Their investment created a domino effect, raising the competitive bar across the board. By 2011, the Big East sent 9 teams to the NCAA tournament, a testament to how one program's success can uplift an entire conference. From Auriemma's perspective, investing in women's basketball goes beyond money. It's about time. I say this literally all the time. Your time is your most valuable asset. Money is important, but if you have to take your time and redirect it into areas that you don't feel comfortable or that you don't love what you're doing, it negatively affects everything else in your life. And nothing could be more certain, more true than in an effort to add resources and dedicated to building something that lasts. He's seen it firsthand at UConn, the ticket sales, the TV deals, national exposure, all of that. It strengthens the program and creates a feedback loop that makes the program even more attractive to players and fans alike. If you listen to any of the recruits that we've talked about, Gandima Mamel, even Agat Maker, who hasn't signed. UConn is my dream school. They may not all come, but UConn has created that brand because of exactly what Geno is talking about. If schools want to see a return on investment, they need to make that initial commitment. And you can't expect to build a powerhouse program on minimal effort. You get what you put in. Schools need to be all in on women's basketball, not just as an afterthought, but as a priority. Because let's face it, the men's basketball programs have been priorities for years, and I don't want to take anything away from them. But in schools that the women's team can start to outpace the men in the respect of the resources, maybe that needs to be something that's thought about, or at least equally distributed. In the end, Auriemma's vision is about more than UConn's legacy. It's about creating that blueprint for other teams. Women's basketball is on the rise, and it's going to take a collective effort to keep it there. Because I don't know if it'll start to plateau, but for now, you ride the wave, and then while that wave is going up, underneath it, the foundation has to be laid. And for those of us in Connecticut who care deeply about this sport, now's the time to double down and not get complacent and make sure this moment isn't just a peak, but the foundation for long-term growth, where UConn leading by example can voice their strong opinions like Auriemma pushing for unity, and the future of women's basketball looks brighter than ever. Coming up, we go around the game and talk must-watch non-conference matchups this season and player of the year candidates you need to know about after this. Nothing beats the energy of watching basketball live. The cheers, the intensity on the court, and maybe even spotting a celebrity in the crowd. I remember being blown away by the energy of fans at a live game the very first time I went when I was a young kid. That excitement just isn't the same on TV, although it's gotten pretty good. And with the experience in the season heating up, it's the perfect time to experience it all in person. Game Time is making it even easier to get tickets for any event, not just sports. Game Time picks filters out of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on seats, whether for a concert, a theater, or a favorite team. I was just checking out tickets for an upcoming game on the app and found some fantastic deals. The seats and the prices, these are obviously not for sporting events, but still, it doesn't matter what you want to watch. They have all of it. It's a fantastic one-stop shop. The seats, the prices, the view, it was all spot on. With Game Time, what you see is what you pay. Thanks for all-in pricing that shows the total up front. You even get a view from your seat, which is the best part about it. Plus, actually, maybe the best part is the lowest price guarantee. They get you covered with flexible customer service and event protection too. It's designed to make buying tickets a breeze. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Game Time. What time is it? Game Time. Welcome back to Locked On UConn. Starting this week, we're going to dive into some of the most exciting storylines of the college basketball season on both the women's and men's side in our last segment of the day, kind of getting everybody in UConn Nation a little taste of kind of around the game, so to speak. So let's dive into the most exciting non-conference games of the season. These matchups will set the stage not only for the NCAA tournament in seeding, but also give us a preview of some of the season's top players as they face off. Each of these games will impact both teams' resume and player legacies. So what's a few to keep your eye on? Number one, how about UConn? How about UConn, North Carolina, where I will be? And if you're going to be there on November 15th, I'll be likely in media row. But if you see me, knowing how the Greensboro Coliseum is, it's very easy to access the media. Just shoot a wave. Tell me that you're a Locked On UConn fan. I'll probably wear some kind of Locked On UConn swag. So would love to kind of meet up with anybody before the game, after the game, whatever you think, because we're all UConn fans and would love to talk UConn women that day. But outside of that, how about December 12th, UConn versus Notre Dame? Must-watch game featuring, obviously, Paige and Notre Dame's Hannah Hidalgo. Their head-to-head battle isn't just about bragging rights. It's a potential early showdown for National Player of the Year race. Also true. And both teams carry top 10 rankings. This game will give us a big clue on how these players can lead their teams against elite competition. That's at Notre Dame. I think I have UConn struggling that game just because I think it's their first road game. If I look at the schedule really quick, let's do that really fast. Yeah, I think when I was doing the game by game predictions, I had UConn losing that game. Wah, wah, I know. They're not going to probably go undefeated this year, guys. I think that's just something that we have to start to remember as UConn fans, is that it's kind of impossible to keep the the expectations of the past with how much better the competition has gotten at across the board. But yes, let's look at the full team schedule here. It's not their first. It'll be it's their first. That's what I meant by that. It's their first true road game, because they play again the game in North Carolina in Greensboro on the 15th, but that's not on North Carolina's campus. They're in Chapel Hill. This will be neutral. Lots of Carolina fans, I'm sure. I'm sure lots of UConn fans will travel. But yeah, first true road game at Notre Dame. Might be an L, but I think it's going to be a good game. South Carolina versus UCLA, November 24th. Another massive game where we see South Carolina's dynamic guard lineup, including Raven Johnson and Malaysia Fulwiley, go up against UCLA's star center Lauren Betts. This game will test South Carolina's ability to handle the size in the paint with the absence of Camila Cardoza. I think that's going to be a really interesting one. It's also a chance for Betts to prove she's one of the top bigs in the nation and do it against the big bad South Carolina Gamecocks. Number 3 on the list, Texas versus Notre Dame. Madison Booker of Texas will face off against a girl we just mentioned, Hannah Hidalgo, in what's bound to be one of the best guard matchups of the season. Both players are young stars who bring scoring ability and playmaking to the table. This game should be a high-energy clash. Of course, next on the list, February 16th, another game that I'm planning on being at. This game is between UConn and South Carolina, 2 Titans. UConn at South Carolina, February 16th. Women's basketball featuring Bueckers against the South Carolina team, that talented backcourt of Raven and Malaysia, with both teams likely eyeing a number 1 seed. This game will have major tournament implications. I'm curious by that time what South Carolina's record will be going into that game. Would they be undefeated? Will they only have lost 1 game? The SEC is a lot tougher this year, and they have a lot of non-conference games. If you look at their season, they play neutral site versus NC State. They play at UCLA, a Big Ten team that's top 5 in the country. Neutral site, I think, are home versus Duke. They play home against UConn. They play home versus Texas. They're at Alabama, Oklahoma. They play Tennessee this year. Texas again, because they're in the SEC again. So I'll be curious. Will South Carolina be that juggernaut this year, or will UConn come in to a 1 or 2 loss South Carolina team that's kind of battle tested at that point? Because that'll be with only 1, 2, 3, 4 games left in the season, the last third of the year before you play conference tournament games. But as we look ahead, who are the players that are Conference Player of the Year candidates? I think what's interesting to me is I only really kind of dug into the Power 5, so to speak, and I put Big East in that category because with UConn in the women's game in the Big East, you can't not put them in there, right? Obviously, Paige is that Big East Player of the Year. She is versatility personified. She led the team in blocks last year. That to me is always going to be the stat I bring up. Paige can shoot 50% from 3, but the fact that at 6 foot she led her team in blocks is a testament to how great of an athlete she is and how versatile she continues to be. But they have a really tough non-conference slate. I think her ability to really dominate Big East opponents will kind of show up in this. And I almost feel like, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful to anybody else in the Big East, but it's almost going to be like the Big East is the testing grounds for when they play tougher opportunity. And what I mean by that is work on things that hopefully lead to opportunity, right? Whether it's playing on the ball 90% of the time, or maybe it's 70% of the time is the magic dust of how this team can be a national title contender again this year. So I think that's going to be the Big East is in for a treat because Paige is going to dominate this season. The Big Ten, Juju Watkins, USC. Watkins exploded onto the scene last year as a freshman, breaking records with scoring performances. This year should be looking for some domination in the Big Ten, which is new for them because they're coming from the now defunct Pac-12, especially with key matchups like the one against UConn in December. She's already showing she has what it takes to lead USC in scoring and playmaking. and her skill set makes her a serious contender for national honors. So I think she is the overwhelming choice for Big Ten Player of the Year, although Lauren Betts might have something to say for that with another defected Pac-12 school and UCLA being in the Big Ten. In the SEC, it's Madison Booker. Although what's interesting about her is she is both a playmaker and a scorer. It puts her at the top of the SEC player rankings. However, don't count out players like Raven Johnson or Malaysia Fulwali at South Carolina, who also are in the mix for SEC Player of the Year. But with how talented they are as a collective, returning I think 8 or 9 players from last year, and also having the number 2 ranked player in the country to kind of bolster their freshman class. I wonder if they split votes. Like with if you're a fan of football and the Heisman, if you have really good running back and quarterback, sometimes they split votes in the Heisman because there's not one focus on that team. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with South Carolina in terms of the kind of Player of the Year recognition. But I think Booker's the one that you should book as SEC Player of the Year. ACC, Hannah Hidalgo, again, someone we talked about earlier. She's small little dynamo, average 22 points a game. She'll face top players like Tania Lotson from Florida State. And if she continues to perform at that high level, she could bring home the ACC Player of the Year award. She's my favorite for that. And in the Big 12, Ayoka Lee, Kansas State. She is a dominating presence in the paint, scoring nearly 20 points per game and excelling in shot blocking. Her experience and consistency make her a clear leader for Kansas State and a top choice for Big 12 Player of the Year. Iowa State's Audie Crooks, another strong competitor, will keep things interesting, but Lee's defensive ability gives her the edge. Each of these players has talent, drive, and opportunity to make a lasting impact this season, not just in their conference, but nationally. With so many intense non-conference and conference matchups ahead, expect to see these Player of the Year races tighten as the season progresses. And we're going to do this all year, guys. We're going to try to follow not just UConn women, and that's going to be my priority, but I want there to be a well-rounded show at the end of the year where we have knowledge, where we bring in guests from around the country that talk about, women's basketball in a way that maybe you see in other programs, but I really want to bring that to this show and really show that we are committed to kind of giving a fully immersive experience when it comes to covering the UConn women. So this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I really appreciate everyone that's joined. We're asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. Our goal every day at Locked On. Again, thank you, Geno Auriemma, for helping me co-opt that phrase in my sign-off. Go Huskies.